Hello, everybody. Good evening. I am April Chapman. Welcome to the Standard of Truth podcast. Tonight, I am super excited. I have a very special broadcast for all of you. I see people are starting to come into the room. Let me know if my sound sounds okay. If I'm looking a little blurry, kind of let me know. I don't want to spend too much time on the housekeeping things because I need all of the time to spend with my guests tonight. If you did not see the thumbnail, tonight we are discussing socialism, and we're discussing socialism from a unique perspective. The guest that we have tonight, not only does she happen to be my friend, she's also my sister in the Lord, and she is the author of Lying Dog-Faced Pony Socialist. Lying Dog-Faced Pony Socialist. My guest this evening is Madison Moore. Let's go ahead and bring her on. Hi, beautiful.
How are you?
I am doing great. I'm so glad to have you here. Hey, RC, how are you? Thank you so much for letting me know that the sound sounds good. Let's do this. On your way in, please remember to like this video and then also share it. Share it particularly if you have college age children or friends or family members that are college age. This conversation is going to be so important for them. I would also share this video with other individuals that you may know of who don't know much about socialism, but you may have heard them discussing socialistic like ideas and that concerns you. And then you can even share this with your capital loving friends. There is always something new to learn about socialism. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So, Madison, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Let's first of all, let me tell the audience, how did we meet? The years are like running all together. Uh,
No.
but yeah, how did we meet?
Yeah, so it was somewhere outside of Atlanta, I want to say, but it was a Scott Pressler cleanup. And I don't even know if we were assigned to the same group or I just kind of like gravitated to you like a fly is drawn to a light. And we were just picking up garbage together and talking about, the Bible and conservatism and health and lots of different things. And
Right.
I just was like so enthralled by you. I thought you're the best. I still think you're the best.
Oh,
Um,
thank you. But
and it just kind of formed a friendship from then. I mean, it's not kind of so consistent, but it feels like every time we talk, we just pick up where we left off, which is really
right. Right. So guys, we were literally picking up trash. Like that's
cool.
not an exaggeration. There was a community cleanup and it was in DeKalb County right here outside of Atlanta. It's the county where I actually live. And the goal was for people to just come together and pick up trash. And this was during I had to have been the 2020 election because COVID was still kind of new. Some people were
Right,
wearing masks, but most of us wasn't. It was still very early on where, I mean, the
right.
hysteria was there, but we were just all together in the hot sun, scorching, picking up garbage. And for some reason, I think you and I don't know if they assigned us to the same team, but we just hit it off
Yeah.
immediately, talking about everything from abortion to, I don't know, food choices. The conversation was just crazy, but that is actually how we met. So since then, you've been pretty busy. I know at the time you were still finishing your undergraduate studies at Mercer
Mhm.
University, but girl,
Right.
you pumped out a book. So we're definitely going to be talking about the book tonight. But
Right.
before we do that, you need to tell the audience about your 15 minutes of fame. How did you get labeled a lying dog-faced pony soldier?
Yeah, so it was a very almost unbelievable kind of experience. One of those things that you're just like it's so crazy it's either true or it's insane. And so basically I was with my college class for a course on elections, and I had been assigned to the New Hampshire caucus. You attend either excuse me, the New Hampshire primary. You attend either the caucus in Iowa or the primary in New Hampshire, and I was assigned to the primary.
Right.
And so we were up there just attending different rallies, listening to all the candidates speak. It was really cool, blah, blah, blah. And so one morning they had scheduled a town hall with Joe Biden. And, I'd already seen him speak and he wasn't my candidate. I wasn't really interested. And I had asked my professor if I could sleep in. He was like, no go, you're going. And so I ended up at this town hall that I didn't really want to be at. And it was very close proximity. I mean, I was probably like 15 feet away from Joe Biden. So he rambles, and eventually he opens up the floor for questions. I mean, he was still doing that at the time. And I kind of had this question in my head, because he had just come in fourth in in the Iowa caucus, and everybody was shocked because he's the former vice president, he's Obama's lapdog, like he is supposed to be the front runner candidate, and he
Right.
came in fourth. And so I asked him the question. I said, you're arguably the candidate with the greatest advantage in this race. You weren't burdened down participating in the impeachment trials like some senator candidates were,
Mhm.
and you were the vice president for 2 terms. So, how do you explain the performance in Iowa, and why should the voters believe you can win the national election?
And that was a great question, by the way. I was just like, wow, that's a good question. And we all stood in real time and waited for the answer.
Waited for the answer, yeah. And so he took the mic back and he was like, "Well, Iowa's a caucus. Have you ever been to a caucus?" And I, just being nervous because he is the former vice president, just kind of like nod my head because I'm not expecting him to talk to me.
Right.
And he says, "No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier." And everybody around me kind of laughs, and I'm just like, did the former vice president just call me a liar? Like, what just happened?
On national TV.
Yeah. And so he kept, gauging questions and eventually concluded. And it was just like a swarm of lights and mics and cameras just kind of descended upon me. And some of it was rambling, some of it was coherent, to be fair. But it was like interview after interview after interview, like email after phone call after email. I mean, I wasn't on social media at the time because I was trying to be like off the grid as much as one really can be. They
Right.
were contacting me through my father and through my brother. I mean, it was like
They were hunting you down. Did they just want a statement? Like, what did they want?
some of them were asking for interviews, some of them were offering me money for like exclusive interviews. I mean, it was like I mean, it was Inside Edition. I had an interview with BuzzFeed, Fox. There were clips on CNN. I mean, there were clips. Some of them didn't do interviews of me. Some of them just had clips and pieces of it. But Ben Shapiro discussed it. Who else? Stephen Colbert had it on his show. He had a hilarious clip. Trevor Noah, who I
I
don't
saw that.
find very funny, he did a really funny piece on it. So it was just kind of this huge thing, and it was international too. So Sky News in Australia was talking about it, in the Guardian in the UK. So it was just kind of this huge, like, oh my gosh, did he just call a college student a lying dog-faced pony soldier? And what the heck is a lying dog-faced pony soldier?
Right,
Like,
we all were
nobody
just
knew
like,
what
"What
it was.
is," and I remember I shared this is before I even knew who you were. I shared it because I was like, "Did he just really do that?" And I remember you were just standing there like, "Okay." And it was just like, "Alright." And I was like, "That poor girl," but we were more so focused on him and how he just, with wanton abandon, just said that, to this college student, and he didn't even blink twice, like, he didn't even feel bad about it, like,
No,
"Oh, well, that may have been a little harsh." He just moved right along like
right,
nothing happened. And,
right.
I remember that. So that's literally that was your 15 minutes of fame, but tell us, like, how did that negative experience turn into a positive for you?
Yeah, so, I mean, it was really bizarre because it's just, like, all this attention, and then suddenly you go back to class and nobody cares, and you're just like, "That is so" it's so weird, it's kinda like this emotional roller coaster,
Right.
but, basically, like, it got me really invested in the election,
Mhm.
and beyond that, I reached out to one of my mentor who had, kind of been coaching me along since high school. And I said, "Hey, you know, I got all this media attention and I think we could actually use it for something beneficial. And I'd really like to write a book."
Mm.
And he's, like a bigwig constitutional lawyer, yada yada, who has connections. He gets me a book deal. And I basically take what I'm learning in this course called Moral Foundations of Capitalism and do the best that I can to fuse it into a book with my personal experience with Biden. And so it was certainly a process. I don't recommend uh, writing a book when you're still in school and when you've never written one before, if you don't have like a
Were you
personal guide or
weren't you
something.
taking, like, 8 were you taking, like, 18 hours at the time when you decided to write this book?
That's a good question. I don't remember my exact course load, but I was full time.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a lot.
yeah.
That is a lot.
So it was pretty busy, and, you know, writing a book is like it's like writing the longest term paper you've ever written, except the whole world is gonna read it, not just this forgettable professor. So it was definitely a different level of stress. But, it was really it made me learn a lot and solidify a lot of, you know, ideas that I had previously only sort of cursorily or, peripherally interacted with.
Right.
And so, it was and at the time, as you know, I was sort of undergoing this political metamorphosis where I had been on the debate team for 2 years, year and a half, something like that.
Mhm.
And if you know anything about college debate, it is like take leftism and then concentrate it 7 times over, and that's what college debate is. It is, like, some of the most concentrated leftist circles in the country, no
So
doubt.
there's no balance with the opposing
No,
viewpoint, it's just
no,
mostly leftist ideology.
no, it is, like the best way I can describe it is race to the bottom. Like, who is the biggest victim at the table because they deserve to win? And so you would have people were like regularly recording coaches in college debate circles saying legitimately ideas like, well, we should send white people to the moon or like expel them from Earth. All these, I mean, it's just
And what about the white people that were on the like, them too? Or just, like, don't like, how
presumably.
I don't even understand how that works. Now, and I've been told that I know that today's, university system and post-secondary education landscape is very, polluted with leftist ideology, but you would think in a debate environment where you're supposed to be able to logically and methodically debate opposing viewpoints, that there would be, okay, yes, we have leftist ideology here, but then you've got conservative bent and then maybe some libertarian stuff in the middle. But from
Right.
your experience, it was distinctively leftism.
Oh, yeah, and I don't even think any people within college debate would deny that. I mean, it's sort of just like an understood, like, this is left-wing circles, conservatives are not welcome here, um,
Oh, wow.
and they really, like, view them as basically evil. And I guess one of the best indicators to sort of demonstrate that is one of the most popular race, not races, cases that they would run because some of their there are different cases you run, like different plans of argumentation,
Mhm.
and the most typical is the CAP-K, which is a capitalism critique, which
Mm.
basically says capitalism is destroying X, Y, Z. Capitalism needs to be dismantled and destroyed because of XYZ and yada yada yahoo.
So this
So,
doesn't sound like debate. This sounds like indoctrination.
oh,
So,
completely,
oh,
completely.
okay. To cloak this debate. Interesting. Very good. So
Yeah.
With that being said, you must tell us about your journey from woke ideology to where you are now. Because I know in the book you talk extensively about your first 2 years of undergrad and how, you felt like when you got there, it was like you had to be woke. And so you were actively, trying to suppress and deny your whiteness and
Right.
attempting to constantly walk on eggshells because you don't want to say the wrong thing and you just have to feel like you're part of the in crowd. Tell us about that experience, the constant need to identify with victimhood because it's the default position on college campuses.
Right. I think a lot of it has to do with like moral signaling. So
Mm.
it's not necessarily that, oh, we actually believe white people are bad, or we believe that white people, as as they're existing today, are doing something wrong, but we gain sort of this a claim to moral superiority when we say, well, as a white person, I wouldn't say so and so, or as a white person, I wouldn't, insert whatever. So
Like virtue signaling.
yeah, exactly. Completely virtue signaling. It's a lot of um how would I describe it? It really just is a lot of creating that dynamic of oppressor oppressed, and it it seeps into every dynamic of friendships and relationships and interactions. So, I'd be talking to like, one of my teammates on debate, and they would be like, well, I think so and so, but as a man, I couldn't necessarily impose that on women, or,
Just
I'm a,
because he's a man, it's like so he can't
yeah,
have an
yeah,
objective view of reality just because his gender precludes him? Is that what you mean?
yeah, exactly,
Okay, that's
exactly.
crazy.
And bottom line is it's a bunch of voluntarily adhered to fascistic tools, which, I mean, bottom line, that's a huge tool of fascism to say, I am tribe A, you are tribe B, and therefore, because we have these immutable qualities that won't be changed, there's no point in us conversing, and we can't converse across tribal lines. And so it's an it's a voluntary adherence to this sort of policy in pursuit of moral superiority, but really it's totally digressive, and it completely erodes the comfortability you feel in egalitarian friendships where you truly view the other person as an equal.
Right,
You and I are different races, but we can talk about issues in good faith, knowing we care about the other person, and we can disagree and not
right,
and not attribute it to our skin color. And
right.
so really sort of the aha moment for me was when a black libertarian student came on the debate team, and we had developed a friendship,
Mhm.
and I was always making these concessions for black people, oh, I say so and so, but I know black people have it harder, I know this and that. And he just got fed up with me. He was so annoyed.
I
He was
read
just
that in the beginning of your book. He was just like,
Mhm.
"Madison, chill, sis. Like, you don't have to
Yeah,
you don't have to keep doing that. Like, I'm
yeah,
good. I'm
yeah,
free."
and he
Like,
was like, I'm an individual. I'm not oppressed. I'm
mhm.
Christian. Like, I do what I want. I say what I want, and I'm not oppressed just because I'm black. And that was just the moment I totally realized I was patronizing him. I totally realized, even though I meant it in a kind way, I was viewing him as lesser. And it took
That is
away
so powerful.
it really did take away my ability to interact with people of different races and different backgrounds as equals. And so first and foremost, that's why I reject this kind of thinking, is because it shuts the door to me connecting with other people. And I'm just not going to I'm not going to do that anymore. So
Right. So I have welcome, dear wholehearted Christian. That's Brother Jacob. He's like, exactly. It shouldn't have to be like pulling teeth to respect each other. So would you say that you would always defer to him and say, make those kinds of concessions and make those kinds of statements because you felt like that was the thing you were supposed to do? Or was it just these 2 years I'm in school, everyone else is doing it? Like, where do you think it really
Mhm.
came from, because I know you weren't raised that way, but it was
Right,
somehow
right,
once you hit campus, it's just like, oh, talk to us about compare and contrast how you know you were raised,
right.
with now you're meeting this libertarian student and y'all are becoming friends and you find yourself having to, do the bow and, well,
Right.
yeah, yeah, talk to me about that.
Yeah, so first off, I wouldn't say it's the whole campus that's left wing. Mercer is a school in the deep South, and while does have very liberal strands and a lot of its leadership is liberal, it's not all departments. So the economics department was fairly conservative, but I was also an international affairs minor.
Mhm.
So international affairs department basically ties into political science and extremely left wing, extremely left wing. So I definitely had it in my classes and in my course load. And then on top of that, I was romantically involved with one of my debate coaches, and he was black. And so that it kind of was reinforcing this, like, do you wish I was black too? Like, do you resent that I'm white? Like, I mean, it really, I don't know, it kind of pulled me into this mentality that, Black people are irreversibly harmed in this country, and the only thing I can do is sort of concede that. And if I don't, I'm denying reality. I'm, you know, uh, partaking in the oppressor role. And
That is
it,
such an oppressive way to like, I'm a black woman and I'm like, "Oh, like, no,
I
that
know it's
helps
really
me live
cancerous.
like, no offense, but I know most of the left-leaning people I know, they don't seem to live in this place where they have joy and
Yeah,
they're happy. They seem to be, and this is, I'm speaking in generalities. Don't,
yeah,
guys, don't take this the wrong way, but it's just like they're just always miserable.
yeah,
And it's like
absolutely.
you can never be good enough. You're always having to, like I said, it feels like a very oppressive way to be. And to
It
me, it's like you're literally implementing and becoming the very thing that you claim that you're trying to fight against.
Oh, completely, completely. And one of my former boss, I worked for him briefly, Brian James Gradusky. You may have heard of him. He wrote how nationalists created, or excuse me, how elites created the national populist revolution.
Now that I
And
have not read.
it's an amazing book. You definitely should read it. And in his research, he found this study that said, typically speaking, when you do tests on people and they see someone of their race, they get warm feelings. They feel affectionate towards them, and it's sort of this subconscious thing. Uh,
Really?
yeah, yeah.
Things I say talk to
Um,
me like
in Yeah, so it's kind of bizarre. We do have tribal tendencies as people, but the only demographic that doesn't do that is white liberals. When they
mm,
see a white person, they have feelings of coldness and disdain, whereas that when they see a person of a different race that is distinctly not their race and is a minority, they feel feelings of warmth. And so it's it really is this, like, self-hating. I don't know, it's very cancerous. And
right.
when I hear white conservative friends kind of indulging some of these ideas, I say, like, "You don't know where you're going, like, this road leads to a place you don't wanna go, like,
Right.
turn around, turn around."
One
You
of my
actually
good friends and fellow content creators, his name is Jason Whitaker, and he runs the Dear Woke Christian YouTube
mm,
channel. And he and we joke about stuff like this all the time because this ideology has crept into evangelical circles. And
yeah,
so when he's on his channel, like Dear Woke Christian, he was like, he got so fed up and tired with it. He started just writing letters to the woke Christian to explain,
right,
like, you go down this path, right? You're
right,
going to end up voiding the implications of the gospel, which is there's neither
completely,
Jew nor Greek, slave nor free. We're one in Christ Jesus. And if you don't abandon this ideology. One, it's anti-Christian distinctively, because the Bible doesn't teach it. And then two, it's just a very miserable place to be in. So to hear you say that, your people you were in school with, or just the leftists in general, the white ones, how they would have these feelings. It's like I have a hard time believing that they are legitimately hating themselves
Yeah.
by the mere notion of them having white skin. That is bizarre to me
Yeah. Well,
when
you
it's
have to be
happening.
fully devoted. Like, I think the more you get entrenched in it, the more you kind of come to hate yourself. Because it really is like, well, everything I have is stolen from natives, or everything I have is uh, gained to me through oppression, or blah, 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 blah. And it's like, there's been a lot of bad things in history. It doesn't mean you're responsible for them.
Right, so are they
And
trying to give the stuff back? I mean, I don't see how
yeah, yeah.
lining up like,
And
here's my house. I don't deserve it. I'll
right,
take
it's
the house.
ridiculous, and more than that, I mean, it's not to say you condone evils of the past, but
Right.
there's sort of this, how do I put it? A meta-narrative idea behind it, described by
Mhm.
Martin Luther, King Jr., that is, where he says, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. Basically saying, like, even though there's a lot of evils in the past, we're getting to perfection. Like, we're slowly but surely getting there. And as Christians, we know the heart of man is wicked. And, you know, human nature has always been wicked.
Right, so I'm like, are
Um,
they expecting something novel to happen? Through
right,
all of
right.
antiquity, like you said, the Bible has already affirmed our heart posture in terms of our human fallen nature. So for people to think that partiality, because I don't like, I mean, we can use the term racism, but I like using Bible language. Partiality as it
Mm,
relates to our ethnic heritage, we know that that's sinful. And of course, Jesus atoned for our sins, but everyone in the world is not going to come to a saving faith or knowledge of who Jesus is, and they're not going to accept him by faith. So why are we expecting, right, for racism to just disappear,
disappear, yeah,
right? And then all of these things are just going to be made new, which is the segue into our conversation into socialism. So in
right,
your book, you talk about, I'll let you before we talk about in the book. First, the reason why we're going to segue into socialism is because there is a thought process out there that socialism is some sort of moral answer to society's problems. So before we talk about it though, give us your best working definition of socialism.
right. So, again, socialism is a very difficult term to define because people use it in so many different ways to mean different things with seemingly legitimate claims to the term.
Right.
I define the term as government ownership of the means of production. So, this ties back to Marx's idea of communism, of socialism, and I do use the terms interchangeably in the book. I give a justification for it, but you have to buy it if you want to find out what it is.
That's right.
Um, and so basically, this idea that the economy is not independently run by individual actors who own resources and attempt to direct them towards other consumers who will pay for them voluntarily. It is run by the government who allocates what belongs where, what is produced, how it's produced, and who gets what. So essentially, the government owns means of production, meaning what we live on, lumber, steel, food, any kind of resources. The government owns them.
Water.
Water.
In a sense,
Um,
right. Yeah. That is crazy. So you talked a little bit about where socialism comes from. It's an inherently Marxist idea. Would you agree with that?
oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Especially the way it's used today. They're
Right.
certainly talking, and like I said, it's been used and claimed by many different countries and people groups, but in the way American liberals are using the term socialism today, it's very Marxist.
Wow. So tell us in that sense why does socialism suck in comparison to capitalism? So if you want to go ahead and define capitalism for us, I think most people kind of know, but we don't want to assume. There might be some people who legitimately don't know. If
Right.
you were comparing and contrasting socialism to capitalism, why, in your opinion, are you saying that socialism sucks? Well, that's my term, but we can use
Right,
it.
right. So capitalism would be the complete opposite of that, which is basically that individuals own the means of production, whether it be by means of inheritance or purchase or what have you, through legal means, individuals can obtain and utilize whatever resources they like within the bounds of the law. And so, essentially, why this is so critical is that it gives people the ability to build their lives, to gain resources, to better themselves, to cultivate their skills, to cultivate any property they may own for the benefit of others. So,
Right.
the beautiful thing about capitalism is that it harnesses what we typically tend to view as a negative thing, that is selfish ambition, that is your innate.
Call it that.
I
No.
know, I'm just talking in generalities, what
It's
people
American
immediately.
ingenuity.
Yes, I think it's a good thing that we have an instinct to live, we have an instinct to thrive,
Right.
and that can be channeled for godly purposes. It can be channeled for evil purposes too, but bottom line, it says the way you prosper is by benefiting others. So
Mhm.
the reason Jeff Bezos is so wealthy is not because he's gone around beating people across the head and stealing from them or picking out of their wallets. It's because he provides valuable services that people want and need.
And now
It's
we're demanding, like, "You're not fast enough, Amazon. You should have been
exactly,
here 2 hours
exactly,
ago, and I ordered it an hour ago."
exactly, exactly. And so it's more this idea that the individuals have the freedom to do that within the bounds of the law, so far as they're not, like drug dealing is not an acceptable form of capitalism. Human trafficking is not an acceptable form of capitalism. There are lawful bounds on this, but basically the idea that people have the right to use their resources and their abilities to their choosing. And what we've seen is what historians have basically dubbed the Great Enrichment.
Mhm.
And what we've seen is that in the past 200 years, the globe has seen more economic development and prosperity on all metrics than in the previous 18 centuries combined. So,
Wow.
what we're looking at essentially is an explosion from an average yearly living. An average yearly income, and I'm ballparking here, I can't remember the numbers exactly off the top of my head, but um, from 2,000 years ago would have been around $1,000 across the globe. And today we're looking at about $14,000 across the globe per annual basis. So even though that doesn't sound like a lot, that's a lot of people being lifted out of poverty. That's a lot of people, that are have moved from abject poverty to relative poverty.
Right.
And so, a lot of liberals have this idea that if everybody doesn't have it, it's not progress. Well, that's not progress, it's a miracle. Like,
Right.
nothing is going to be available to everybody at once immediately. These things take time to develop, to become cheaper and more accessible.
Right.
And so what we see in America is that every single significant metric of modern living is virtually 100% accessible. So you look at cell phones, computers, electricity. Between 95 and 100% of Americans have access to those things or own them.
Right.
You look
Even
at,
right, if you're in abject poverty, I mean, you've got a smartphone or some
yeah,
form of it. Right.
yeah, yeah. And in one of my chapters, I kind of go into this discussion of when we're talking about poverty in America, we're talking about something extremely different than, you know, starvation in sub Saharan Africa, which would
Right.
be, by all objective terms, like, like abject poverty, like starvation level. Like, you may not make it another day.
'Cause you
And
don't know where
people,
your meal is gonna come from.
exactly, exactly. And that's virtually non existent in the US. So when you look at all the meaningful metrics of lifespan, of quality of life, of material goods, of, information access, of literacy, any
Mm,
meaningful metric you can apply, capitalism proves to foster human well-being. And
I
so
agree.
it's a pretty exciting thing, because, we're living on the shoulders of giants. We are enjoying prosperity unknown to generations past, and we don't even realize it.
Right.
And so there's kind of this concern that that could be lost. Um,
Right.
so
So right now we're talking about Madison Moore, author of Lying Dog-Faced Pony Socialist, and she talks about a call to save free market. So we're comparing socialism with capitalism, and my next question really has a lot to do with this income inequality question. So on page 105, 105 and 106, you talk about income inequality. And you
mhm,
actually say income inequality seems to be the new normal of the socialist left. The very idea of it angers them. And then you go on to you talk about it, but what I want to know from your perspective is, do you believe the core issue behind this income inequality argument, is it covetousness or is it something else at play? Because I grew up in the late 70s and in the 80s, and I didn't grow up with the everybody gets a trophy, right?
mhm.
You were taught to compete. If you weren't the fastest runner, you didn't get a trophy. Like, you kind of learn to just deal with the fact that there was somebody better than you, there was somebody who had more than you.
And that
Um,
makes
and
you resilient.
Right, and if you wanted the trophy, you were like, "Well, I guess I need to work harder the next time and practice." But
Mm,
then when you introduce the idea that's like, "You get one and you get one and everybody gets one," there's no need for you to actually put in any effort or work hard. There's no desire to compete. So tell me, do you believe that the core issue behind this income inequality argument, is it covetousness, the desire to want what someone else has? Like, what do you believe is at play?
hmm. I mean, I think anybody would be remiss to say covetous doesn't at least play a part in it because, again, as we just discussed, the heart of man is wicked. And for it to be one of the 10 commandments to say, thou
I
shalt not
should not
covet,
covet. Right.
it really was a problem. And I know certainly it's a problem in my own heart when somebody gets something I wanted, or they get the job I wanted, or the thing I wanted. I certainly become envious and have to repent. But I think another factor at play that conservatives aren't really willing to tackle fairly
Mhm.
is, again, one of the ideological outgrowths of the leftist meta narrative, which is that people are interchangeable, and they're not.
Mm.
They're not. So they want this idea that, you know, the student that's grown up in the inner cities without a father in the home, who has gone to schools that have underdeveloped his IQ, that is surrounded by, drugs and crime, um,
Right.
he has he has an equal capability as a child born in a two-parent household, with a potentially higher IQ, who's given every opportunity in the world. And sometimes that deals with race, sometimes it deals with culture, sometimes it just deals with your environment and the opportunities available to you.
Mhm.
But leftists, more than anything, want people to be interchangeable cogs. They want women to be the same as men to be the same as women, and racial groups to be completely equal and interchangeable. And we know that's not reality. That's not
Right.
reality. And that doesn't mean every individual is not endowed with divine worth and is not an image bearer of our creator. Does not mean they're not valuable, but it'd be ridiculous to say I'm as beautiful as, you know America's Next Top Model, or it'd be
Right,
ridiculous
like, we
to
know
say,
we on
yeah,
our level. We're here, they're over there, and that's
yeah.
okay. But
So
it's just like,
we
"Well, I should have won." On what basis?
exactly, on what basis? And so we're very uncomfortable with this idea that the only true ways in which we're actually equal is before God and the law.
Come
And
on, sis. Right.
and
That's it.
and And even before the law, we're not all that equal. I mean, look at the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. It's ridiculous. Um, so, there are people smarter than you, there are people dumber than you. And the reality is, in a meritocratic economy, people are going to do differently. They are going to perform differently. And that's a good thing in some ways, it's a bad thing in some other ways. But nonetheless, it is reality. And so it's hard because on the one hand, it does almost involuntarily create a class system based on IQ,
Mm,
right? When smart people have the ability to make a substantive living and people with an IQ below 100, there's nothing for them to do. Machines are taking over their jobs. And so that'll be a question for the coming decades of what we do when nobody can do a job better than a machine.
mm.
When machines do a better job at being journalists, at being news anchors, at, being accountants and so on and so forth. But as of right now, the meritocratic system has been the best at delivering prosperity widespread. And I
I
think
mean, but even if we flesh that out, there are just some things that machines will never be able to do. I mean, humans are quite innovative, right? I mean, we're a far cry. The Egyptians were pretty creative too and innovative, but and I'm sorry if you guys can actually hear that. The guy is doing our lawn and he's like super loud. I don't know if you can hear. I hope not, but oh, great, because I can. It's like right here. Um, but yes, so that is a concern that machines are taking over some of the basic activities that humans would do. But
right,
humans have always, and when I use the term evolve, our skills have to evolve. Like we're no longer a primarily agricultural or a country, and so
agrarian.
folks are
Yeah,
not out here tilling the ground with by their hands. We have machines to do that, but you still have people are always going to be needed. But that's where training and new skills become developed. And I'm just one of those people that I'm like, look, we need to find a way or make a way. Okay, so a machine takes over this. I'm trying to learn how to. Someone needs to repair that machine, program that machine. Repair the. Did I say that right? Repair, program,
maintain. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
These
I
are
totally
all
agree.
skills that people can learn and acquire, but you actually have to go after. Like no one's going to hand it to you. Like here, you know, y- America's
Yeah.
always been that way. And so my next question is, why do you think socialism is so attractive to millennials and Gen Z?
Oh, that's such a hard question.
Is it?
I think. eh, I think it's multiple things. I think number one, when you look at wealth possession
Mm,
in terms of generations, this generation is doing extremely poorly.
right.
They don't own homes by and large. They're not married by and large. They have very little in savings by and large. And so I'm not sure how to explain that. I don't know
I
if
can a little bit.
I think part of it's personal responsibility and work ethic, but I think for it to be happening on this scale, there might be some other factors going into it.
Right. Do you think it's maybe Gen X, which would be my generation,
Mhm,
literally it's the entitlement, like, well, I want my kid to have everything that I didn't have, so I don't teach them a healthy doctrine of work.
mhm,
So many in the millennial Gen Z generation literally like, okay, but it should just be done for me. Kind of like
right,
the smartphone. It's just like, well, I don't know. I don't have all of the answers, but that's just one consideration, the fact that we didn't pass on that same healthy doctrine of work that our parents we didn't have everything handed to us. It was just like, well, no, if you want that, you have to get a job. So at 15, we're out working, and working in, the corner grocery store or McDonald's wasn't beneath us. But if you tell, someone in Gen Z now, like, you need to go to McDonald's or cut some grass, I can't sweat. It's almost thinkable for them to actually connect labor and compensation. It's just like, no, 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 I just want the compensation. I don't want the labor part. Y'all can have
right,
the labor part. Do you
right.
think that could have something to do with it?
I think it's a big part of it. I think there definitely is that component, and I don't know how to explain that, but I mean, there certainly is this generation is massively left leaning. So
Mm.
redistributive type policies are appealing to them. Again, socialism is tied into a lot of the social justice theory and a lot of the, sort of victimology. And to them, that's their solution. That is their solution.
I actually
And
like what Mark Network just said. He says their parents place too much trust in money. Their children's view of happy life change. Right. Like me growing up, like happy it's a subjective term, but it didn't take much to make my generation happy. And now with my children, like if we take them on a vacation and we try to go all out, the next vacation they're trying to top that. And I'm like, do you know how much we just spent for you to have this house on the beach and you want me to top that? I'm like, little girl, go sit down somewhere. Like, no. Like they're almost, and I don't feel I raised my children to be entitled because I don't
right,
give them everything, but my husband and I committed, we wanted to give them experiences. So it was just like,
right,
oh, okay, when we on a vacay, we want to go all out. But when it's time to scale that back, they're just like, well, this house doesn't have a pool and like in it. They want the pool in the house, in the basement. They want the best view. And if it's not on the beach, oh, we have to walk. I'm like, oh, whose child are you? Because I don't even, I, but I, I'll admit that is because the expectation and the bar was set too high. I should have just took them over to Lake Lanier and just be like, go on to the beach and go be happy.
right.
But because you try to have this extravagant
Mhm.
experience, the next one, if it doesn't hit that mark, they're ungrateful. So this year they might not even have a vacation because, well, one, we can't find a place to stay, and two, it costs too much. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked.
No, no, but you're right. That's really insightful, and I don't know how to explain it, and I really don't understand it, but I definitely am experiencing firsthand this generation is not doing well. And I think part of that is leftist ideology, but a lot of that too is like they are isolated, they are depressed, they are not mentally healthy. Of course they're not doing well. Of course they're not doing well. And
Isolated in what way? Because now I have views on the lack of social skills and social interaction. I think a lot of that has to do with social media, the hookup culture, swipe left, swipe right.
right.
So is that what you mean by they're not doing well, social the isolation?
That's a huge part of it. I mean,
Okay.
is smartphones and like depression/anxiety are almost correlated one to one. I mean, it's unbelievable what these devices do to our mental state and how they isolate us from other people.
That is true.
But on top of that, there are some downsides to living in an individualistic society where, unless you specifically belong to a religious community or a civic organization, or you are intentional about building community, you will be isolated in this culture. You know,
Right.
we and this is one of the downfalls of a pluralistic society is that, what you have in common with the person next door is that you both pay taxes. And
Yep.
that, yeah, other
I'm
than
so
that,
bad 'cause I don't know their names or their name. I have no idea who those
yeah,
people are,
yeah,
and
you
we've
both pay
been here
taxes.
since, like,
And
2015.
you frequent the same businesses, but there's no community in this country because we don't have a groundwork of mutualistic values or mutualistic culture or religion or anything to bind us. And so people retreat, and it's really sad. So, you know, even though we know the gospel is the truth and we know that, salvation comes alone through Christ, I'd a heck of a lot prefer to be a practicing Jew right now than a practicing atheist. I'd heck of a lot more prefer to be a Muslim with a tight-knit community than a secular humanist who, you know,
They
how
don't
are
have
the
a basis for anything. I've never considered that, and I mean, obviously, as a believer, I'm just like, "Hey, Jesus is the way," but I see what you mean because of the lack of community. When you adopt a secular humanistic worldview, you don't have an epistemology to appeal to for why you should do this and why this is important. It's kind of just like, well, I don't know anything. So I'm
Right.
just living with no moral standard. I'm just kind of doing what I want to do without love of neighbor and thinking more highly of others than you do yourself, things like that. I never considered that. I could see definitely how the erosion of some sort of faith-based community has caused a lot of, like you said, the isolation, the anxiety, the depression.
Right.
But even within Christian evangelicalism, that is still a huge problem
That's
because just trying to get people out the house to come to church because they're like, well, I just want to watch it online. I can't tell you how many Christians I've
no,
met in the past
no.
12 months since churches have reopened that they can't
They're
tell you
supposed
the
to go
last
home.
time they actually went to gather with other believers, and I'm just like, "That's not healthy." Like that
No. No,
no,
and
but
that's
it becomes
certainly
social.
not what we're commanded to do in scripture. Watching a screen
Right.
is not gathering with other believers. And you hit on just the point I was about to make, which is that part of organized religion is ritual. And ritual is
Mm,
important to community. Ritual is important to building connections with others. And empty ritual is not so great. But
right.
you know, ritual is important. And beyond that, I can't remember where I heard this, but um, the saying went something like, "The natural result of a society that holds nothing sacred is depression," and I
Mm,
think that's a
that
huge
is
part.
good.
So
I can see how that I know a lot of people, I mean, we've all had our struggles, our mental health is a huge topic these days. I know it's not completely related to socialism, but if
mhm,
you look at socialism as an economic system,
right,
I don't see depression and death and destruction are the end result, and it
right,
concerns me that so many of our millennials and Generation Zs think that that's gonna be the answer to their problems, just give me a minimum basic income, pay all my bills, and
right,
then it's all gonna be okay, but it's a lie, it's really a setup. It's never worked anywhere else in the world, and I don't understand why they believe that socialism is the moral answer or the answer to how we achieve happiness.
right. Well, I think that's the answer to that would be twofold, is that number 1, they're historically illiterate. They
Mm,
haven't read 20th century history. They have no idea what happened in Maoist China. They have no idea what happened in Pol Pot's Cambodia. They have no idea what's happened time and time again across the world, that
Venezuela.
when government seizes the means of production, they choose who lives and dies, and most of the time they choose most people to die. Um,
Right,
and then on top of that, there is undoubtedly, um, elite circles of pernicious leftists who refuse to allow that reality to be taught as true. And
right.
so I
So
hear
they're
about this.
basically lying to them.
They're lying. Yeah, they're lying. And so, I would say, like, those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. But,
Right,
if we're lying to ourselves, what does it matter whether we know history? If we can't function with a portion of honesty, we're not
right.
going to get anywhere. And
Mm,
so I think that's a huge portion of why our generation thinks the way they do about socialism, is they've been lied to.
right. So in case you're just joining us, we are talking with author and my friend, Madison Moore, author of Lying Dog-Faced Pony Socialist. Madison, tell us, why should people read this book? Like, who is it for and why should they read it?
So it's for young people, it's for skeptics, it's for college age students who are curious as to what evidence could potentially point them towards the conclusion that capitalism is a preferable system to socialism.
Right.
Um, I think really the book is for anyone who would be open to considering the evidence. And if you're already convinced about socialism, you may as well just save your 15 bucks. But
You know, I don't know because so when first of all, the good part that I loved about this book is you are so relatable from no,
Thank
now I'm
you.
being honest. Normally I don't read intros. Normally I'm like, okay, where's chapter 1? So I'm skipping through looking for chapter 1 to start. But in this case, I actually read the preface. And from the moment that you read the preface, Madison pulls you in. She is
Mhm.
such an amazing and talented writer. Her
Thank
use of
you.
language, it's not overly pretentious, and she's using flowery words and great adjectives, but they're words that you identify and can recognize. But
Thank
she
you.
literally paints an amazing picture like when you were describing Mark in the book, like I pictured him, like, already in my mind have an idea of how Mark is, what he looks like, his
Yeah,
personality. When you were describing, um, what happened when you were in, at the caucus, or not the caucus,
the primary, yeah.
at the primary, like, you painted such a vivid picture,
Oh,
and
thank
to me,
you.
it's an easy read. Like, my 12-year-old can digest this and walk away like, "Mm-mm, no, no, no socialism for me,"
Right.
because she pulls you in when the way she tells the stories, it's funny, it's engaging. Like, I didn't wanna put it
Mhm.
down,
Thank
and I'm
you.
not just by okay, so y'all, Imma let the cat out the bag, right? I am featured in the book, but that is that's not why I love the book so much. Um, like I said, I met Madison after she had her 15 minutes of fame, and because you were talking about socialism and you knew I was a small business owner, you were just like, "Hey, can I just interview you for the book?" I didn't know how much of it you were gonna actually use in the book. I was just like, "She's probably not gonna put anything in it." And then when I got to page 82, I was like, "Oh, like, I got, like, 3 pages." I was like, "Really put me in." And
Yes.
it okay, I ain't gonna lie. I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I am famous." Like, I'm in a book, but it's not just for the sake of being in the book. It
Right.
ties in all together and dispels and completely demolishes this idea that
Black people are
people,
bad.
like, the Black people are oppressed, and, like, I'm not special. When you read her book and include the anecdotal story where she interviewed me and I kinda told my story, you're gonna see yourself like, you know what, I could do that. Like, that seems really achievable. Now, what I'm not saying is that there were no obstacles along the way, because there are, but that's just life. Like, suck it
Right.
up, buttercup. Like,
Yeah.
don't be a fragile snowflake. Recognize, particularly if you're a believer, that in this life you're going to experience trials and tribulations. How you deal with them, how you respond to them, and the person you become as a result of those, that's what matters. It's not all the money you're going to earn in your lifetime, but it's just like, wow, the person I became because of that challenge or that struggle. Like, praise be to God. God got the glory, but it was for my good. Um, but I absolutely loved the book, and I want people to get it because it's such an easy read. And if you have young people in your life, like, this is the going away to college book. Like, this is graduation month. You need to get this book and gift it to a graduate, because they're going to be assaulted with this worldview the moment they step on campus. And don't think just because they've been with you for 18 years and you've injected your biblical worldview that they're not going to get sucked in and pulled in just like Madison did. Because, Madison, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I was raised in a conservative Christian home in the
See?
South. I came from my parents were divorced, but my mother remarried a very, upstanding Christian man. And I really had no excuse. I had pretty much every tool tool available to me to sort of know right from wrong. I guess the one thing I would say is that I wish I hadn't been in public school. And if you can avoid putting your child in public school, please do not feed them to the mouth of the devil.
Listen, y'all heard that, right? And she grew up in a nice, upstanding community, but she is saying that there's something very sinister going on in our public school system, and believers need to pay attention and take heed to that. Because for you to think that your child is going to be safe and come out unscathed, I would argue that you're being very, very naive. And I'm actually going to do a show about what that looks like, what it looks like to take your child out of the government school system, and what are
Mhm.
the alternatives and what you should be
Yeah,
doing as a parent instead. But go ahead. I didn't mean
absolutely.
to
Well,
interrupt.
no, I'm so glad to hear you say that because I certainly adhere to Paul Washer's view of that. If you're giving your child to the government
Mm,
35 hours a week, and then you put them in church for an hour or two a week, what do you think is going to influence their mind more? Like, what do you think is going to shape their worldview? It's not you, it's not the church.
mm-mm.
Cool. So,
Right.
yeah. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on that. But yes, I had every tool expendable to um, adhere to the Christian worldview. And frankly, I loved my sin more than I loved anything of truth or of the Lord.
Right.
So, first and foremost, I love sin. But beyond that, the heart is easily deceived. And I was deceived for a while. And so, um, yeah, but the Lord was gracious to me, and I was glad to. First, I was pulled out of leftism, and then I was pulled out of my sin by the Lord.
Mm.
And so,
Y'all don't understand. I'm excited because Madison and I went out to dinner, and didn't we kind of shut the restaurant down? Like, it was like by the time we left, I think we were like the only ones there. It was just like, okay, it's time for
yeah,
y'all.
we were there a long time. We were having such a good conversation. Some lady came up and was like, "I want to be part of your conversation because it looks so good. Like you guys
Right,
are
right.
having so much fun."
And at this time, we were discussing, you were like, I was raised in a Christian household, and we talked extensively about sin, and she was hammering me with those hard questions like, well, why are good things happening to bad people? And the usual, I'll call it seeker questions. And I welcomed her questions because, one, she's a fellow image bearer. I automatically had this deep love and affection for her, for the fact that we were picking up trash together in the hot sun, like we bonded, right? Like, had it not been COVID, we would have shared the same water bottle that day, but
Right.
it wasn't safe. And I distinctly remember you were just like, I mean, I was raised in a Christian household, but like you were like, I kind of like sin,
Yeah.
and we discussed the gospel and the implications of it. And then, we hugged and then we left. And then to find out that in September of last year, the Lord draws you to himself. Um, that I was more ecstatic about that than when you were like, the book's coming out, it just
It's a way bigger deal.
right, it was such a big deal because I knew you when you were writing this, right? You were not converted. You were just like, yeah, Christianity's nice, right? Like when stepdad's pastor, like whatever. But it really wasn't on your radar like that. I mean, you had so many questions, and to know that God worked in your life in that way, like I said, it's way better than being an author and all these other worldly accomplishments. It pales in comparison. But
Right.
um quick question here. Wholehearted Christians, like, if we remove all of our children from public schooling, where will salt and light be? Just, I know you're not being disrespectful. Remember, we welcome questions over here. You're fine, Jacob. I'll add my 2 cents in, and then, Madison, if you want to answer, here's how I always answer that question. Children, depending on your theological view and how you understand salvation and discipleship, I would argue that children, I'll speak for my children, right? I give my children the gospel often. They've been raised in a Christian home. But out of my 4 children, I could not, in good faith, affirm their salvation um, as it stands right now because, one, none of them have made a profession of faith, and only one of them actually shows signs of the Lord even working in his heart, having a clear understanding of the gospel. The issue is when just because we're raising children in a Christian home with
Right.
a moral view, they are not equipped or prepared to deal with the onslaught and assault of the worldviews that they are constantly being bombarded with. Because it's not like they're going to school to be educated. They're going to school and they're being indoctrinated
They're
with
being
an opposing
socialized.
right, with an opposing worldview of in what you're doing in the home. So how can unconverted littles be salt and light when most of the time, 9 times out of 10, they are still unconverted themselves and they haven't even come to a saving knowledge of who Jesus is. And even still, let's say a 10-year-old does, the Lord works in their heart, they are sorrowful and broken over their sin, and they place their faith in Jesus. They're still a new convert. Can a 10-year-old really go toe to toe in battle with a teacher who is demanding that they call their classmate a he when it's a she? Yeah, they might be a little brave and be able to say, well, my mommy says that I can't affirm that, but they don't really have the maturity to even handle that. That's my opinion. I just don't think they are spiritually mature enough. And even me growing up in a Christian home, I would have back then, of course, I identified as a Christian, but I was not born from above. I simply was in a Christian home, and the best that I could do was just be like, well, I just know that's a sin, but I can't adequately defend it. I couldn't provide a compelling apologetic, right? Like now my kids are way ahead, they're light years ahead of me where they can explain, what sin is, but they're still, to me, I don't feel comfortable injecting them in that environment because I don't feel they're going to have the tools to
Yeah.
adequately fight back. What would you say?
I think that's a great analysis that I couldn't have come up with,
Oh,
considering that I'm not a mother. But, just from a personal perspective, um, you know, coming into middle school, I was exposed to every kind of sexual perversion that I never needed to learn about.
in
I was
school.
Oh, in school, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I was exposed to every type of profanity, every type of this and that, and it was normal in the classroom. And, if you want to be salt and light in the community, go serve, go start a program, reach out to these kids because most of them have no one investing in them. But
Right.
don't, I would not advise anybody sacrifice their children on the altar of potential salt and lightness because you first and foremost must take care of your own home. If you want to be good salt and light, if you want to be that city on a hill, you gotta make sure you're still burning bright. And so, that's what I would say is um I mean, there's some good public schools, I'm sure, somewhere in this country.
Right.
They weren't where I lived. Um,
She said
and
it right. It definitely not
yeah,
work.
so I I would never, if at all possible, do not send your kids to public school.
Right. A government school, um, literally sending your kids to Caesar and hoping they don't come home and get letters. It's like, I'm thinking about this. It's fucking cheap.
Right.
So it put it in like so it's
Right.
and
We're not gonna-
you're talking about our average student. It's like I have to probably equip them.
right.
And it takes more than an hour on Sunday. It literally is my life's mission. We're talking about gospel focused, gospel centered things all day long in the car, in the grocery store. If like on Wednesdays, the girls go with me to work and people come in and we're like, it's a full-time job shepherding and discipling children who do not know the Lord yet. We can assume that just because they're growing up in our homes that they're act like so many kids make a profession of faith because they're like, well, it's just supposed I'm 12 now. Like, I think this is what like that's why I did. I was like, well, it's about that time, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I remember I say prayer and a few Sundays after this little new members class, I'm gonna get baptized, and then it's all good. But there was so much wickedness in my heart, and I knew I was an unbeliever. But for years, my mother affirmed my salvation, and I'm like, "Are we talking about the same child? Because that's not me." Now,
Right.
Mama, ooh, is
Sorry,
that
that's
me?
me.
Oh,
I'm
right.
sorry.
Our parents have this view of their children And sometimes it is a wholly inaccurate view. The person that my mother thought I was is not who I was before a righteous and holy God. And finally, one day, I think it was in my 20s, I was just like, you really need to stop telling people that I'm saved, because I was like, I am living for myself, cutting a fool out here. I know for a fact if I die tomorrow, I'm going to hell. Can you please stop affirming my salvation? It's one of the most dangerous things I believe that parents can do. And I think we do it because the thought of, oh, well, my child may not know the Lord, that's a hard pill for us to swallow. But
Terrifying.
that should be more the reason why we give them the gospel and give it to them often. Every day, if you can, remind them, you know, you did in sin and shaped in iniquity, right? You know, you need to repent, because what is, like, that's me. I had that conversation with the 12-year-old yesterday. He's playing video games. I'm like, hey, can you know the gospel is, right? And he's like, yeah, mom, I know, like, I've heard it. And then I'm like, no, no, no. Let's get to the bare bones of it. We needed to talk about it. And
Right.
he has a very good understanding, but on his own volition, he has not come and made any profession of faith. And so in good faith, I can't affirm him as my brother in the Lord yet, but he is my baby. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I love him so much.
Right, and that's honestly, that's a hard thing I've been coming to the realization of walking in faith is that, like, so many people around me who think they're Christians, there is absolutely no fruit in their lives.
Mm,
And while it isn't useful or productive to go around pointing fingers or with a waving a magic wand saying, saved and not saved, 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 not saved,
right,
you can't help but tell. Like, when they're drinking and fornicating and cursing on a regular basis, that's a pretty good indication they don't know the Lord. Like,
right,
that's a pretty good indication they're not saved by grace through faith in Christ alone. That's a pretty good indication. And
right,
so, even though the Lord knows the heart of man, what did he tell us? You will know them by their fruits. Not
right,
you will guess them by their fruits or have a fairly clear estimation of them by their fruits, more or less, give or take. Like, you'll know them by their fruits. You'll know.
right. I
And
love it. I absolutely love it. So what we were discussing before we got to the gospel, Lying Dog-Faced Pony Socialist, with my friend and author, Madison Moore. Madison, you are a joy and a pleasure.
thank
I've
you.
enjoyed having you on. I don't know if people have questions or not, but the link, if you're on YouTube, the link to Madison's book should be in the description box. You can go straight to Amazon and get it. It is an easy read. I mean, it's not even 150 pages, but it's a page turner because she pulls you in, like I said, with the way she tells her stories. It's very compelling. You're not gonna want to put it down. She's gonna be like, oh, okay, well, tell me about this. You're gonna like, I've got my little notes in it and everything. It is such a great read, and you get to read about yours truly on page 82. I did not think that I was gonna make it in the book, but I did, and I'm so grateful for that. So yes, I am pushing the book for two reasons, because I've never been featured in a real book before. So
I'm
that's
sure that won't be the last time.
who knows, who knows?
You're
But
a
I
superstar.
I did have a bonus question,
Yeah.
and it's about climate change, right? So we hear so much about climate change, and I have my thoughts on it. I mean, from well, now when you wrote this and you talked about climate change, at that point, you know, you were not a believer. And so you gave lip service, like, yeah, I mean, it's probably a thing, but it's nowhere near what people are making it out to be. I don't
Mhm.
know, are your thoughts on climate change still the same as are in the book? Have they evolved some? What are your thoughts on climate change? Like, should we be freaking out? What is it? What
Yeah,
is that
so,
whole phenomenon about anyway?
um, pretty much my take on the situation with climate change is completely and utterly informed by um, scientist and activist Michael Schellenberger.
Right.
Um, and he wrote Apocalypse Never. And it is the most informative, eye opening, unbelievable book you can. I other than the Bible is better, obviously, but, on this issue particularly, I I believe what Michael Schellenberger says, and he gives multitudes of evidence to indicate that, yes, this is a problem, but no, it's not a catastrophe. And I do adhere to that analysis because the evidence given for it is sufficiently compelling. More than that, when you look at the people who are harping on climate change and the solutions they provide, it's a joke.
Right.
They want people to suffer. They want people to suffer. They want jobs to be lost. They want the economy to tank. And look what's happening right now.
Right.
Look what's happening right now.
The very things you just said.
Exactly. The Keystone Pipeline has been shut down, and all the supposedly green people are happy. And we're looking at $5 a gallon, maybe 10 this summer is what some are projecting. And
I'm freaking out about that.
it's
Not freaking out like I don't trust God, but I'm like, I can't believe I'm alive and gas could get that high. Like, I'm not going anywhere.
yeah. Oh yeah. I rode my bike to work this morning.
Did you really?
I did. Which
Well, I'm about to have a summer bod all year long if I have to start riding a bike because I'm be sweating and just burning
I
calories.
didn't realize how sweaty I'd be all day. That was kind of an issue, but whatever.
Right.
But yeah, no, my opinion on climate change is pretty much unchanged. That if anybody actually cares about making things sustainable, they'll promote nuclear energy. And if they're not promoting nuclear energy, I don't want to hear what they have to say. Like,
Right.
I just don't.
My thoughts on climate change is, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and they that dwell within. So it's like, listen, if the temperature of the earth is heating up, like God is holding up the world, like by the
Mhm.
word of his power. And so I sleep very good at night, knowing that the distance of Earth from the sun is exactly the way it's supposed to be. The moon, the distance that the moon is from the sun and Earth and all the solar system, like everything is the way it should be. But I
Mhm.
also recognize that the Earth is screaming for its day to be made new again. And so, yes, things are happening, stuff is shifting, but God is in control and there are no maverick molecules. So why am I freaking out about the climate changing? Like it's hot right now in Georgia. It's hot every summer. Like this is nothing new.
Right.
So
Which, even though we do accept the Lord's sovereignty, I think we can also accept that there is a possibility that,
things up.
yeah, that we're engaging in very poor stewardship. And we've certainly seen examples of that. I mean, there are plenty of examples of that. We met knowing that there were examples of that. We went in a community to pick up garbage.
I mean,
People
we didn't even scratch the surface. We were like, we need to come back because it was so much trash.
we couldn't pick up all the garbage.
We couldn't get it all. And
Yeah.
I was just like, wait a minute, we're not being paid. Does the county clean here ever?
Yeah.
And this was in Madison's in my community. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about because on that day, on that community cleanup, I'ma say it because y'all know I don't care and I take the backlash. There were more people who did not look like me cleaning up in that community cleanup, and it was in a community of color. There were more people who did not look like me that were out there in that hot blazing sun joyfully cleaning up. And I was embarrassed because I was like, well, wait a minute. Like, I don't live that far from here. This is technically my community. Like, I'm out here, but you can count us on one hand. Everyone else was an other. Now, you tell me how that's okay.
Mm.
To me, I was glad that they were there, right? But
Right.
it was also an indictment because I'm just like, we're probably the ones that messed this up and we should be the ones here cleaning. But it wasn't. And people were just driving by and they were looking at us clean with their nice air conditioned windows rolling up and we just sweating like, just hot. And you were out there happy, me, Lisa, and Marcy, and it was a fun time. But I was just like, something is woefully wrong with this picture.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know, I feel like that could be a whole nother conversation unto
Right.
itself, is this connection of community and tribe and, ultimate like, I do feel loyalty to my kinmanship, like, I do feel loyalty to my countrymen, like, but ultimately, I we are sisters, we are the same tribe because we are of the Lord, and saved by grace through faith. And so I don't know. I hope you don't carry any of that with you. Just like, I kind of had that internalized, like, white people bad, therefore I'm bad. It's like,
Oh,
well,
no.
yeah.
Girl, you can leave all that at the foot of the cross because that's some foolishness. And
Mhm.
we're sisters in the Lord, like you said, we've been adopted into the family of God. So none of those, existential realities matter in the kingdom of God. And
Right,
that's the beauty. So to me, the answer to socialism truly is a gospel-centered answer.
right,
Because if you look in the scriptures, the Bible does tend to advocate more for a capitalistic system than it would a socialistic system.
right,
I mean, our American constitutional republic is just built on so many biblical values that I
right,
don't understand how the Bible believing Christian could, in good conscience, embrace socialism. It's just
right,
anti the scriptures, it's anti the Bible. Like we're taught as Christians to live peaceful and quiet lives, work with your hands, earn your own living, provide for your family. If you don't work, you don't eat. I mean, that doesn't sound like socialism to me. And then the church, we have our own charge to care for the orphans and the widows, not the
right,
government. We care for our own.
right,
That's just taking care of the household of faith. That's not socialism. That's just doing what the Bible commands us to do. Take care of the orphans and the widows. Um, but and
right,
outside of that, we can teach you how to fish, but we're not gonna give you the fish, give you the hook, give you, the fishing pole,
right, right,
no, like there's levels to this, but it's handicapping to just hand someone everything and then expect them, one, to be grateful, and
mhm,
then two, do what's right with it. Like you said,
right,
because our hearts are wicked, pretty
right,
much. Yeah,
right.
it's
Especially when there's no accountability as with the government, because the government existed before you, it will exist after you. It cares not if it pleases you. Like,
and it's
so
only there to restrain the evildoer and just to maintain law and order. But outside of that, the government should not, for the Christian, we are regulated by the precepts in scripture. We should not feel that we need over reliance on the government to
right,
tell us how to treat our neighbor. Why? We have the scriptures for that. We don't
exactly,
need the government to tell us how to educate our children. We have the scriptures for that. We're to train them in the fear and admonition of the Lord. We're to teach them all the things that Jesus commanded. Like there's just so many
right,
principles in the Bible, and it bothers me that Christians, not all, for the most part, are embracing these anti-Christian values and these ideologies, and they're unable to see on the surface that, wait a minute, this is the antithesis of what the scriptures teach regarding my Christian conduct and then my life as a citizen of heaven, but also a citizen in whatever country I'm called to live in.
right, right. Which, and first off, number one, thank the Lord for Vodi Bakum, who speaks so boldly on these things and has the magic melanin to do so without criticism.
Right. 'Cause what
And
they gonna say, he's racist? Well, now they do call him some names though, but
I'm sure they
yeah,
do. I'm
he's
sure they
very
do. But even going back to the question of socialism and, some people saying, well, socialism is like a biblical, idea. I think of, and I don't remember exactly where it's found, but the passage where Jesus is teaching and a man calls out to him and says, good teacher, please tell my brother to split the inheritance with me.
mm.
And presumably, you're like, oh, yeah, like not just one person should inheritance. And Jesus says, first off, nobody made me judge over this, so I don't know why you're asking me. Second off, everybody it, it can destroy you. And I mean, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but
Right. No, I do it all
this
the time.
idea that
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm entitled to something somebody else owns. Christ says, no, no, guard it.
Mm.
And just from a local perspective, that's one of the things I go back to. Is you know, my mind is inclined towards egalitarianism and equality in resources to say, like, oh, yeah, an inheritance should be split. But no, the Lord says what's more important than whether you get half of your inheritance is if your heart is greedy.
That's the overarching
That's
point he's trying to make. And
right.
if we're all honest, for us to say, well, I deserve X. No, in God's eyes, you deserve judgment and death. But by his grace
Yeah,
and his mercy, you haven't gotten that. So be
right.
grateful for what you have. Now, when there's legitimate injustice, yes, we deal with that. But even still, like you guard your heart against greed and envy and covetousness and the entitlement of, well, I deserve and therefore I should have. It's the wrong posture for the Christian. So
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
think, I'm sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
no, I was just agreeing with you, saying absolutely. Yeah.
So I think, hey girl, Chicken Grease, she's hilarious. She's like the resident comedian. I'm surprised she's in here late, but I have other content creators who have a competing live going on at this time. So
Mhm.
I believe that we're all split between 3 different other channels. But we're about to wrap it up here. Once again, you can get Lying Dog-Faced Pony Socialist on Amazon right now. The link is in the description box. This is my good friend, Madison Moore. She is the author of the book, and she is famous for the 15 minutes of fame of being called a giant dog-faced pony soldier by our current president, Joe Biden. So, like, woo, like she was famous for like a negative, but the Lord used it for her good and his glory. I'm so glad that you've chosen to join me tonight. I hope you guys go and run and get her book. It will bless you. Gift it for a recent high school graduate, or even if you have someone that's going into their next semester in college, it would be an amazing gift to teach them on why socialism sucks and why capitalism is a better form of economic sustainability.
Mm.
That's it. Any final questions? Any final comments?
For me?
Yeah. Do you have
Oh,
anything?
just I'm sure a lot of the people listening to you are probably already believers or seeking the Lord, but just want to say keep it up, keep looking for the Lord because He's the only thing that matters. And everything else will fade away, but the Lord is good. And every good thing you've ever received in your life has come from the Lord. And even though you think submitting to Him is sacrificing happiness, it is gaining it. It is gaining it in fullness. So just follow the Lord.
That is right. That is right. Well, love you guys. Madison, you stay. Don't like leave. I'm gonna go ahead and end the broadcast. But thank you so much to everyone who chose to join us tonight. Right. I praise God that He saved her as well. You have no idea. Thank you so much for everyone who has chosen to join us tonight. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. I am April Chapman signing off. Thank you for joining us tonight.